okay. About I guess about a third of the way down the page. And we're in the middle of discussing the case of the overseas trip with its tragic results. Tashma, so we're about let's see, 18 lines down. Tashma. Ha'isha shahahi ba'al din sayam. Brisa says, woman goes with her husband overseas, Ubavi Amar Meismali, and she came and reported her husband died. Tinase v'titel ktubasa. So we believe her. She can remarry and she can collect her ktuba, her benefits from her ktuba. V'tzarasa asura. But she's believed with respect to her own situation, but her co-wife cannot marry on the same basis. We would need proper testimony from two witnesses. Rabbi Elazar Omer, Elazar says, "Ho v'hutra he hutra nami tzarasa." Now this isn't consistent. If we're going to allow her to remarry, that means that we believe the husband's dead, and if he's dead to both of them. So the co-wife can marry as well. So that contradicts what we said earlier, that we believe the woman with regard to her own testimony, but her testimony is not sufficient for somebody else, for the co-wife, right? Whereas yesterday we said that we have to consider, like maybe she might be spiteful, and even if she damages herself, right? So my answer is Ema ho hutra v'nises. We have to amend Rebbe Elazar's statement or reread it, that since she already married on the basis of her testimony, then the co-wife becomes permitted. But so we only apply this if he's dead idea if the first wife went ahead and actually remarried, right? If she acted upon her testimony, then we say, well, she wouldn't. I mean, the basic assumption is, she's not gonna commit basically adultery, because she's the only one who knows if she's really telling the truth, right? So she might come to court and say my husband died, right, and collect her ketubah, but if she actually goes and remarries, well, that's a good proof, okay, because we're going to assume that she's not going to commit adultery knowingly. So in that case, we do believe her testimony 100%. Maybe why don't we say that, okay, like she's saying that her husband died, but maybe what really happened is the husband divorced her, right? Did not divorce the other wife, right? And now she's coming to mess up her co-wife by saying, I can remarry because my husband died. When really she knows she can remarry because she has a get, she has a divorce, but the co-wife doesn't have a divorce, right? So she says the husband is dead, and now she's messing up the co-wife. Behind the the reason that she says that he died, because she wants to mess up her co-wife. My answer is okay, so you know what? You're right. If she marries a non-Kohen, right, then you're right. Then we have to suspect that she might have remarried because she got divorced, not because she's a widow. But here, what are we talking about? She married a Kohen. If she married a Kohen, she can't marry a Kohen as a divorcee, right? Only as a widow. So if she marries a Kohen, then we have to believe that she is indeed a widow and her co-wife can remarry. Next mission. How do you identify a dead person, right? Let's say, somebody's in some kind of a situation where he's killed and it's hard to identify him. So how do you identify that someone is dead? So you have to be able to see the face with the nose. Okay, that's good enough to recognize someone. Even though, that the guy was wearing a plaid suit when he went out this morning, and he was carrying a brown briefcase, and you find somebody whose head is obscured for whatever reason, but he's wearing a plaid suit and carrying a brown briefcase, that's not good enough. You have to be able to see the face. And you also have to be there. You have to see that he has actually died. His soul has left his body. Well, even though you saw him, suffering from wounds that were clearly, fatal, and he was being eaten by a wild animal or hanging from gallows. That's not enough. You can't conclude that he must have died. You have to actually witness his death or see him in the state of death. Now, it's actually interesting that, there are a lot of cases where I don't know the details of how they determine that someone is dead in circumstances where you cannot have direct observation. But I know that this does happen. So I don't know to what extent we
about testimony.
I don't know. Yeah, or there are cases like burning buildings, or there was that submarine, right, where it vanished, right? They actually found it like 20 or 30 years later, but it was ruled that the widows were widows, right? That they
could also died. From what we've been learning, correct me if I'm wrong, if you have two witnesses testify that they know someone passed away or was killed, that's sufficient, correct? Right. Or am I wrong?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. But here, the nature of the testimony is being discussed, and the Mishnah is stating that you have to actually see the dead body and recognize it. Right?
Which could be very difficult, right?
Right. So I don't know to what extent this Mishnah is taken into account for practical purposes. I mean, yeah, you still need witnesses, right?
What do you do, heaven forbid, in those times if the body was burned beyond recognition? Heaven forbid.
Exactly right. So I don't know to what extent this mission is relied on practically. And you have to the witnesses have to have seen the body within 3 days of death, because presumably afterwards it decomposes and it's not necessarily recognizable. No, you have to take things into circumstances into account. If the body's in a freezer, then 3 days is not an impediment, right? He's not specific. He says you have to use your judgment, basically, which I think is more the case of how we practice. Rabbis taught, what if you only see the forehead and not the rest of the face? Or the face below the forehead, but without the forehead. And meeting, then you can't testify. Excuse me. You have to see both the forehead, the face, the nose. We're getting a little specific here. Abai says, Mikra, what's the verse that supports this? Hakaras Paneam Ansabam. The Navi, the prophet, says that, this is a metaphorical statement, right? It's like we know you by your deeds, right? Or by recognizing you, but it uses the phrase hakaras panehem, the recognition of their face. So it's the face that the face is how you identify a person. Abba Bar Marta dehu Abba Bar Minyume, also known as Abba Bar Minyume, said, Havamaski Bedveresh Galusas, is that he owed money to the family of the Sarge. I say Kira, so he bought some wax. Davak Belisa Davak Bapuse, and he kind of took the wax with a shmata and he put it on his forehead. Khalaf Kamay a little bit shakruha. And he, because he covered his forehead, they didn't recognize him. He was able to walk by his creditors without them recognizing him. So kind of a support that that the forehead is an essential part of a recognition of a person. So the Mishnah said, even if there are other identifying signs, you still have to see the face. That was the first opinion of the Mishnah. So the Gemara questions this Mishnah. It's like, really, you can't identify someone from other indications other than the face? Is that true? Immediately, we have another brisa. Talking about a document, a get, right? So you have, the get has to be written for a specific woman, right? If you write a get for your wife and you give it to an agent and he delivers it, has to be a chain of control, right? There has to be like if he finds another, if he loses control of it and then finds it again, and it's for the same woman, that's not good enough. You have to know that this was the one that was written for the woman. But this Brisa says if you found it like in your briefcase or in your purse or with your ring, right? Oshanim ben Caleb, you found it in your suitcase, right? I feel it was manru, right? Even if it was after a long time, kosher, and that's okay. Like that is that's a sufficient sign that this is the one. If it's in your suitcase, this is the one that you had all along. So this indicates that having other indications, right, external signs that this is of identification is valid, right? Because you found the get with your, with your other papers, right? So that it's not, you can't identify the get itself. There's nothing specific about it or way to identify it, but because there were these external identifiers, that's good enough. So why don't we say the same thing here? That if of course plaid suit, then even if you can't see his face, you could recognize him. Hi, Lakasha. Brisa is not a problem. Hi, Rabbi Elazar ben Mahavai. The Brisa reflects is the opinion of and Harabban, our Mishnah is the rabbi. So yes, there's a disagreement between the Mishnah and the Brisa. The Tanya. What's the source that there's a different opinion? This other Brisa. Ein me'idin al shuma. You can't identify a body based on a mole, right? Like a person has a birthmark or something, that's not good enough because somebody else could have the same birthmark. Rabbi Elazar ben Mavai Omer, Rabbi Elazar says, no, you can use this identifying mark. My love, maybe this is the argument. Maybe this is the point of contention, whether these other factors are good enough to identify somebody. So that would explain, the Mishnah and the Brisa follow these different opinions. Rav answers says no. Everybody says you can use these identifying factors. What the Brisa is talking about is a common mark. So let's say a lot of people have, a mole on their left cheek, right? In a certain time or place, right? So in that case, you can't use that as a sign because it's not sufficiently identifying, right? Because a lot of people have this sign. Marsav Shuma Matsuya Vengilo, Marsav Matsuya Vengilo. What they're arguing about is this particular the Brisa, which talks about a mole, where the question is, what kind of mole are we talking about? If we're talking about a common mole, that's commonly found among people, then everybody would agree that it's not a good sign identifier. And if we're talking about an uncommon one, everybody would agree that it is a good identifier. What they're arguing about is a mole common or uncommon? That's what they're arguing about. Because some explain as follows. They're arguing about the type of mole that would deteriorate after death, right? So if it's something that would change after death, change appearance after death, then you can't use it as an identifying mark because it would have looked different when the person was alive. And Marcel right now, everyone says no, we're talking about a mole that remains. This looks the same before death and after death, and so it is valid. So I don't use it. Vikadam, right? Or there's another explanation of the contradiction between Mishnah and Brisa. Rava, Simanim Drabanim. Rava says, no, everybody agrees that it's a rabbinic rule that you can identify somebody with these external or additional factors. Hacha, Vishuma, Simon, what are they arguing about? Is a mole considered a unique identifying mark? Which it kind of sounds to me the same like what we just said before. Marsavar Simon Mufak, Marsavar Love Simon Mufak. So one says that a mole of a particular appearance is a good enough, is as good as the face, let's say, and the other says no, it's not as good as the face. Okay. So according to the first explanation, where we said that, yeah, Rava holds that these external identifiers are valid for at a Torah level, and Rabbi Eliezer said no. Hakatane, our Mishnah says, Alpha Pishesh Simani B'Gufo V'Chelav. Our Mishnah says, wait a minute. The Mishnah specifically says, even if he has an identifying mark, you still have to see the face. So like, why would that be? If you want to say that the identifying marks are biblically acceptable, then why do you have to see the face? Why does our Mishnah say you have to see the face? These other things should work too. So the answer is Gufo the arots for goods. When we say when our Mishnah says that he has signs on his body, right? It doesn't mean a mark. It means like tall or short, right? Like if somebody was unusually tall, or if tall or short, like that's not a good identifying mark. There are a lot of tall people. There are a lot of short people. So you can't identify somebody based on whether the body is short or tall, right? Caleb, the Chashin and Shela. And what about the suit that he was wearing? Somebody else, he could have lent that suit to somebody else, right? So that's not a good sign either. The Ichashin L'Shela, so the Gemara says, well, wait, if we're worried about borrowing clothes, Hamar B'Simane Uchav Hechemadrinan. What about you find a donkey with a saddle or some kind of with a saddle that is identifiable as somebody else's. Okay, so you can use that as the basis for returning the donkey, right? Somebody comes and says, oh, that's, I lost the donkey and it had a red saddle, and you have a donkey with a red saddle that you found. That's good enough. But why? The saddle is interchangeable. Maybe somebody else borrowed the saddle that day. It's not a mark on the mule itself. So no, people don't lend saddles. Because it wouldn't be the right size, right? It has to be custom fitted. So nobody lends saddles. So that's why a saddle is a good identifier. Now, what about the case of the get? Where you find it among your other stuff. How can you return the get on that basis? Maybe somebody lent the get to somebody else, and it was tied up with a particular ribbon, right? It's a little weird, right? Lending a get. So Tabas Chayish is Yufe. Where it says, well, first of all, what is the Mishnah talking about? I should have been more specific. It says if you find the get with a ring, a signet ring, or your wallet or your purse. Okay, so the signet ring, nobody's going to lend that. Okay, because that's your personal seal. Also, wallets and purses people don't lend out because there's like a superstition around it, right? That if you lend out your purse to somebody, you're lending them your good luck or something. So if you find the get with these specific three things, your wallet, your purse, or your signet ring, you can assume there was no loan of anything going on here. Sorry, excuse me. So the Mishnah was being very specific with these three things, but indeed, if you find it, as I misstated before, if you find it with other things that you might have lent, that one person might have lent to another, then that is not a sufficient mark, identifier. You might say more, you can answer. K-love, the chivre v'sumke. When the Mishnah says you can't use clothes to identify somebody, it's like, if you just say the color. Well, a lot of people wear black suits, right? And say, oh, he was wearing a black suit. I use the example of plaid, which is unusual. That the Mishnah might not have a problem with that. Okay. Now we said the Mishnah said that if you saw somebody, at death's door, that basically he had mortal wounds, but you didn't see him die or you didn't see him dead. The Meguya Chaye. So what are you denying that that a mortal wound is really mortal. Minu asks you a question. A person's body does not become tame until he actually dies. Even if he is mortally wounded, even if he's at death's door, he doesn't make you tame. So yeah, what is this Mishnah saying? That the Mishnah appears to be assuming that yes, he is going to die, but he's not tame until he's actually dead. So this implies that you do know if someone is mortally wounded that he's going to die. Abai says, Lokasha, not a problem. Rabbi Shimon, Harabbanan. It's an argument between Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis. The Tanya, what's the source? Meeting al Guyad, they meet it al Tzalit. Another brisa says you can testify about a mortal wound. If somebody has a mortal wound and you didn't see him actually die, you can testify to his death. But not somebody who was hung, right? That person might have survived. Somebody might have actually taken him down from the cross. So unless you see him dead, you can't testify about it. Rav Shimon ben Elazar, Rav Shimon says, no, you can't even testify about a mortal wound. That doesn't necessarily mean that he died. The person could be healed, right? Maybe if ambulance came by and was able to save him. So you want to say that our Mishnah goes like Rabbi Shimon, that you have to wait until he's actually dead. Mortal wound could still be not mortal, basically. Is that what you want to say about our Mishnah? What about the end of our Mishnah? It was a case in a place called Asya. Somebody was thrown into the sea. Also biyadam el, and they found his leg. Right. So the rabbi said, "Min ha'arkuva u'amala tinase." If the leg that they found included the knee, in other words, if it was severed above the knee, then he can be considered dead, and his wife can remarry. But if it was less than that, if we found the leg below the knee, severed below the knee, that might not be a deadly wound. He might have survived. So if that's the case, Rav Shimon, but how can you say this is Rav Shimon ben Elazar? Rav Shimon ben Elazar says even a mortal wound you could possibly recover from. So, and this Mishnah says that no, there are circumstances where the wound is so bad, meaning a mortal wound, that you can't recover from it. So that's because the guy was in the ocean, right? That makes it worse, right? If you have a mortal wound in the ocean, even Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar would say that you're not going to survive. But Rabbi Bar Chana said the following: I saw a certain Arab, the Shakil Safsira the Gaide Legamble. He took a sword and he amputated the leg of his camel above the knee. Lo afsikte lunaruse. And it definitely died. Like it bellowed until it died. Which I'm not sure like what the proof is. Like this is proof from an anecdote, but all right. Abai says Sahi Kachisha Havia. That's exactly what he answers. Like, okay, so that one died. That was a weak camel. Other camels might survive. The fact that one camel died from a mortal wound doesn't mean that all camels will die. Rava says Besakin Lubenis. The Divrei Hakol. When do we say that it's not a difference between Rav Shimon ben Elazar and the rabbis? It's that everybody would say that if the mortal wound was caused by a hot sword, knife, whatever, it cauterizes the wound, then you could survive. But otherwise, you could not survive. That's the reason for the difference between the two sources. Okay, the other part of the said whether if you saw an animal eating it, right? Chayo chalas. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda says l'shono mimakom she'en nafsha yotza. If the animal is eating your foot, then sorry, this is kind of graphic, but then that's not necessarily going to result in your death. But if he's eating your heart, then you're going to be dead. But if if he's eating a vital organ, then you're definitely going to die. And you can testify as such. Shmuel and Yehuda said, "Shachad bo shnaim or rosh shnaim ubarach." What if you do shchita basically on a person? You cut their throat so that the most of the windpipe and the trachea, sorry, it's the same thing. The windpipe and the esophagus is severed, right? Well, that's how you do shchita with an animal, right? That's considered, when the animal's dead. So what about for a person? Meaning, yeah, you can testify the person is dead. Any so Mar says, is that right? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel Shacha B'Shnayim or Rav Shnayim B'Ramas V'Amar Kisu Get Liishti Harei Lu Yitu. What if such a thing happened that a person's trachea and esophagus were severed, or mostly severed, and he managed to croak out, "Write a get for my wife." That's a valid command, a valid instruction, right? So doesn't that indicate that that he still has life in him? The answer is Chayhu Sof Alamos. No, he's not dead yet. What we're saying is that such a wound you can't recover from, right? But it doesn't mean you're already dead as soon as it happens. It might take you time to die, so you have time to instruct somebody to write a get for you. Aliatos, the Gemara says, well, what about Yehei Gola Al Yada? What if you are, if this happened accidentally, right? You're on the roof, you drop your knife, and it falls onto somebody's throat and severs, or mostly severs, these passages. So then you should be responsible for killing him. Now it's accidental, so you're not liable to death penalty, but you are liable to galus, right? To having to run to the city of refuge, right? Which is, if you accidentally kill somebody, then this is the procedure, right? You have to exile yourself, internal exile, basically. Aloma Tanya. So why do we have a brisa? Shachar Shnayim or Rosh Shnayim Harei Einam Gola. We have another source. We have a source that says you do not. You're not liable to this to exile. So Master said Marla Amrav Hoshaya Chashina Shema Haruach Bilbalto. The reason there that you are not liable, that we don't consider you an accidental killer, is that maybe there was a contributing factor. Maybe there was a sandstorm going on and the wound got infected. So it's contributory negligence, but you didn't actually kill the person. Or Shema Ihu Kira Misaso. Maybe that person was like the victim maybe hastened his own death by whatever action he took. Like maybe he was writhing around, maybe he in trying to stop the bleeding, he made it worse or something. So like Marcia Mabina, what's the difference between these two explanations? The Shachte Bevesa de Shesho Parkis. If this occurred in a sealed room, right, in a clean sealed room, then definitely it's your fault. You're the killer. But so that's. But you could still, in the sealed room, you could still have the person, the victim, affect his own death, right? Like by writhing around too much, you hastened your own death. Then that relieves the responsibility of the guy who accidentally killed you. Or you could say that it was observed that the victim did not do anything; he just lay there. Right, so then you can't say he contributed to his own death, but you can still say that maybe the sandstorm that was going on at the time, exacerbated his condition, and that's why he died. Okay, I think we will stop here.
Okay, have a good day, Zah. See you. Be well.